Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Twilight Zone from the 1980s, Season 2, Episode 4. There's 3 stories in this one. They're called After Hours, Lost and Found, and The World Next Door. So, spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon-sponsored review, so thank you very much to Cindy for making the pick. The episodes of Season 2 have been pretty middling for the most part. Obviously there's some variables in the stories themselves with the multiple per episode, but overall the vibe has been kind of like no home runs as of yet. And this one probably does have the best story of the season so far, that being the first one, the After Hours, with a little asterisk, which is that it's a remake of an episode of the original show, and the original episode is still the better version. So, that's a little bit of like a ding on it, but it's such a good story in the first place that this new version's also pretty fun, and kinda does a couple of new twists on it. And not even twists per se, that's not even the right word. Just sort of focuses on it in a way that something from the 1980s might, right? So the original story was very much about this woman who goes to a department store and starts hearing voices, and there's a lot of tension, and the big reveal by the end of the story is that she's actually one of the mannequins from the store, and all the mannequins that are coming to life they're her people, effectively, and she's forgotten that it was her turn to get to live as a human for a month, and now she comes back, and someone else from the store gets to go out and live for a month as a human instead. That was the gist of the original episode. It's a very good episode. It's arguably one of my favorite episodes of season 1. So it was always going to be hard to top it. It was always going to be hard to take that and do a version that was superior. But this one's still pretty good. It's still a good premise. They take the general idea. It's mostly still the same, but it's in a shopping mall now instead of just a department store, which is very 80s in and of itself. And it does It doesn't have as much slow building tension as the original story, and that's the biggest hindrance as to why it's not as good. But it is a lot more colourful, and not just because the original was literally in black and white, but there's a lot of neon lights and things like that. Colourful clothes. There's a couple of mannequins that look like they're out of like a modern art show where they've got like weird headpieces on and weird sort of things happening. And there's a couple of like creepy things they throw in here, like a body or a box of mannequin parts where there's a couple of like actors like under the parts, so like a couple of the heads can actually talk and you can see their mouths moving. Because sometimes she hears voices and it's just like a static mannequin head. Sometimes it's clearly an actor who's got like a plastic mask on to look like a mannequin but is still talking. And they kind of mix and match a little bit, so it kind of progresses. The other thing, though, as we're building up to the realization as she's trying to run and escape the store after it's closed, or the mall after it's closed, is that her leg turns to plastic or wood, whatever the material is. So it's like her leg becomes a mannequin leg, and it's like she's sort of transforming. So I guess you'd call that a little bit of body horror. They threw in a little bit of body horror here versus the original, as she's sort of in denial about what she really is. Because the main thing of it is she comes to the mall as it's shutting for the night, right? Everyone keeps saying, hey, we're about to close, everyone's leaving. And she's like, I promise it'll just be a couple minutes. I just need to run in and get something. And it ends up being that she goes to like a toy store to buy a gift for her landlord, because the landlord was really nice and gave her a place to stay even though she had no money yet, and wanted to buy him a gift as a thank you. He even helped her get a job, that kind of thing. And the store clerk, who clearly is one of the mannequins and is in on what's happening, starts to ask her questions about why she needed to come and do this tonight and not why she couldn't wait a couple of days. And the reason being is that because her month is up, but she doesn't remember that. She doesn't remember that she's a mannequin, but subconsciously she felt that she needed to come and do this now while she still had time. That's kind of what they're getting at. And as they try and make her remember, it's almost kind of like almost like questions in Inception, when they're trying to prove that you're in a dream. They start asking like, oh, how did you get here? Where did you come from? That kind of thing. Here, it goes bigger, where it's like, hey, where are you from? What city are you from? What state are you from? What was your profession? What were you doing a year ago? starts like prodding these questions that start making the main character uncomfortable because she can't answer them. And then it kind of gets into the more typical stuff that I was getting at before, which is the chases. It's her trying to run out of the store because she gets scared. I think before she even talks to the clerk, there's like a boy who's clearly also one of the mannequins asking her to take him with her when she leaves, and she doesn't understand what that means at the time. So clearly they all get this turn to leave, and then they have to come back, and by the end of the episode we get the next day in the mall, and there she is as a mannequin. It's a good story, and I think it still holds up in this new version, and it's fun seeing it with, again, a bit more of a different lens on it, where before it was more this kind of slow, creepy, suspenseful horror. Here it's a little bit more of like an assault on her senses, where they're trying to not let her forget it, and the body horror element in some of the more like weird artistic neon touches that the 80s setting allows. Like I said, there's a couple of mannequins that have got these weird like it's not just headwear, but there's like some lights like on their headwear, and they've got creepy mouths. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's definitely got a quirkiness to it that the original story didn't have. Not that this is like lighter by any stretch. If anything, it plays up the horror equally, just in a different way. But it definitely feels like it's got a bit more of a playfulness to it, as opposed to the straight, just really well-crafted suspense that the original had. But that well-crafted suspense is still, I think, superior of the two, and just feels a little bit more special between them. That said, though, I've not mentioned yet that the lead character here is played by Terry Farrell, who most people probably know from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You may also know her from Becker. Those were kind of the two main TV shows that she ended up on, both of which came after this. But she's the lead in here, and the only face that I kind of recognised. Although the kid that's in this apparently was in one of the Chucky movies, because his photo on IMDb is just of the Chucky doll. So I assume he must have been in Child's Play. He wasn't the main kid in Child's Play. I recognise who that name is, but he must have been one of the other kids at school or something. But yeah, it's a good, fun, creepy story that I think the twist is a lot of fun. I think the build up to what's going on. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I prefer the original, is because when I first watched the original, I didn't know what the twist was going to be. So it was a genuine surprise when it kind of went the way it did. Whereas here, because and this is another thing about this actually, is that, and this shows how much I like the original episode, is that other remake stories we've done in this show, I haven't necessarily immediately realized I'm watching a remake story just because the title shows up. Usually it takes me like a minute or two of the story playing out, and I'm like, wait, this seems familiar. Have they done this one before? And I have to check. As soon as the title of this one came up, I'm like, wait a minute, that's an episode of the original show. And I knew where it was going to go, and they could maybe they were going to swerve me and do something different, but the ultimate end goal is still the same. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I don't think this was ever going to necessarily match the original, is because I knew where it was going, and it was more about kind of how the main character comes to realize it. And that's part of the original story as well, but I think there's a lot more just general creepiness before we even get to the realization of stuff. There's a lot more just quiet, eerie stuff in the original story. And it is also worth mentioning this version is shorter than the original, because the original was a full episode of the show, and obviously the show was half the length, more or less, but still, having said that, even a half-hour show in the 60s was, much closer to 30 minutes than it was by the 80s. And on top of that, the third story is a really short one, kind of eats into this episode's runtime, if you will. So this isn't even like half the episode. This is like, it's more than a third, but not by much. So it's like maybe 16 minutes versus maybe 25 minutes in the original version. So it does kind of speed through a little bit, and there's less kind of, and maybe that's because they expected some of the audience would know where it was going already. I don't know what the reason for that was, but they didn't milk the suspense in quite the same level as the original did, which I think is what makes the original better ultimately. But still a solid version though. Like, I was still happy to see it play out, and I still enjoyed some of the visuals, which were creative and were unique to this version. That was the main thing that was different, was some of the visuals that they do, and some of the You know, because even some of the other characters who are mannequins start having mannequin parts, like one hand turns into a mannequin hand and stuff like that. And that just gives it like a bit more of a surreal vibe. Whereas for obviously as surreal as the idea is that they're actually all mannequins and one's getting to leave for a month at a time, I don't think the original episode ever felt that surreal in the way it was presented. It was more kind of ominous and creepy and supernatural. Whereas here, there is kind of like a weird, body horror was the right word. Like, I don't want to quite say it's like a Cronenberg type thing, because it's not as disgusting as because Cronenberg would be like wet and sticky, and there'd be, lots of like moisture. Whereas this is a bit more simple, but it still works quite well. It works quite well. I enjoyed the story quite a bit. So that is the After Hours. The second story is the little short one in the middle. It's called Lost and Found. And as per usual, when there's 3 stories and one of them's only like, 5 minutes long, that doesn't tend to be a ton to talk about. It's basically just a story of 2 roommates who come back to their dorm room during college, and the main girl starts noticing that stuff is missing. Like her cup that holds her pencils is gone, the trash is gone, her book, which is about political history or something like that suddenly appears where it wasn't supposed to be there before. And she freaks out about this and again, it's only 5 minutes long, so by the time we establish this, like 2 minutes have passed or so, and she starts freaking out, and the roommate's like, what's wrong now? And starts saying, oh, you're just being a bit frazzled, you've just forgotten where you put things. Main character's not buying it. But we have to wrap this up quickly, and the wrap up, as it turns out, is that in her closet, there are 2 time travelers from the future. And it turns out the main character is going to be the first ever president of Earth in the future. And she's known for being this kind, diplomatic person. And not only do they have to apologize for taking her cup, they were supposed to only take something that she wouldn't miss. So they're apologizing, but they also just happily like throw out, oh yeah, she's going to be president of Earth someday. Oh, that's, that's a big deal. We may hopefully we didn't interfere with that by, interacting with her. Hopefully we didn't set her off in a different path. And the end of the episode, once they beam away, is just the main character saying she's going to take more political classes or something to that effect. It's simple. I mean, it's fine. It's a fine, little moment. Like I think the actors do a decent job reacting to what's going on. But ultimately, it's only 5 minutes, so it's kind of like a fluffy little in-between story, and there's not really much more to it than that. But it's very pleasant. I have no real complaints. It's just ultimately it was never going to be anything other than this. So, hey. The final story, which takes up about the back half of the episode, is called The World Next Door, and it stars Norm from Cheers in the lead role. He plays kind of a wannabe inventor. Basically, I would compare him to the dad from Gremlins, where he's building these little things in the basement, and but he's doing it at the detriment of any real job that he has, and his wife is just like fed up. She's pissed off. She's not happy that he's spending his time doing this, and gives him crap for it. Whenever he comes up and he wants to show her something, she's not impressed, and she starts chastising him for not focusing on work and not focusing on other things. Wants him to clean up his workshop and just let it be a basement again, and he doesn't want to give it up. He's a bit of a fantastical thinker. His brain doesn't work that way, as he puts. Like he wants to create things, he wants to invent things, and she kind of keeps putting him down for it. And his best friend is played by Jeffrey Tambor, and the premise of this episode is that we're actually seeing like 2 versions of him. We see the regular world version, which is set present day, and what looks like the mid-1980s, and this is the husband who's the inventor and so on. But there's another version who our main character says that he dreams about each night, which seems like it's set in the past, but it's not. There's actually a calendar near the start that confirms that it's also the mid-1980s. It's just that things have developed there differently, so it looks like 1910 or like 1900 or something like that. He's got a big mustache. But here, he's like a celebrated man who like has maybe invented... he has invented stuff, and he's very successful, and there's an alternate version of Jeffrey Tambor, who's his best friend here still. But his problems are very different. He's very successful, he's very respected, he's beloved even, but he's actually kind of like tired of the grind. He's tired of always having to be important and tired of always having to have all these responsibilities. So, and he also says he's having dreams of the other version, you know, the regular world version, if you will. So it feels like we've got these two alternate realities and two versions of the same character who are dreaming of the other side. And as you'd expect, the story ultimately ends up being about the main character going over to the other one, and he becomes the other one. Like, as soon as he walks through the door that he finds in his basement, he just becomes the other version. The mustache appears, he is that guy. And he gets to experience a night as if he was him, and sees that, you know, there's a couple of, you know, there's a woman who's like really in love with him, that's not his wife, although he also meets a version of his wife in this world, which he immediately falls for, and this version of his wife like falls for him, and it's like there's romance there again, there's passion there again, they're smitten with each other, and she seems to like that he's built some silly little inventions, and it's like, oh, it's almost like too good to be true. But there's also some like weird little details that kind of like go along with this idea that it's an alternate version of the 1980s and not just the past. For example, him and his best friend, like his best friend Jeffrey Tambor says, "Hey, would you like to dance?" And they go and like dance, not in a romantic way, but they just kind of like dance, but it's just them. And the two women in the scene stay back and say something to the effect of, "Oh, don't you wish we could dance as well?" And the other says, "Yes, but our legs are you know, aren't as strong as the men's. That's their thing," or something like that. Women don't dance in this universe, apparently. But also, women propose in this universe because they start bringing up, "Hey, you going to propose to Norm?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm thinking about it. Like, you know, he's a very successful man, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, okay, we're setting up some weird things here about this different universe, which don't really play into anything, really. But they're kind of like interesting details just to set up that it's not just, because I think there was a risk of this feeling like it was just some dream world that Norm dreamt up because he wants a different life, so he thought of this perfect example of a world that he would want to live in. All these weird details about how society's different and how technology's progressed differently make it feel like, no, it is actually just another world. It is just something different. Like, you could like, for a split second when the one woman said, "Oh, it's a shame we can't dance," I thought, wait, if this is some fantasy world, does Norm have like some really weird like sexist ideas? But like surreal sexist ideas that I've never even heard before. But no, it's just like this weird quirkiness to the other world, which is probably my favorite detail of the whole thing, to be honest. The ending of the episode is that when he goes back through the door to grab one of his inventions to give it as a present to his alternate wife that he's met, who basically showed up because she had like was it car broke down, I think, and they hit it off and they have a nice evening together. He sneaks back to his own basement in the real world, or the regular world, to steal his little plant invention that he made, and when he's there, he sees that the other version of himself has come to his universe and is hugging his wife. And the wife, it seems like she's happy. It seems like they're hitting it off because this version of Norm doesn't want to continue being an inventor. He wants to like apply himself to other things or whatever. And they seem to be having quite a happy, from her perspective, reconciliation. And regular Norm, now with the mustache, sort of smiles and gives him a little nod, and he kind of nods back, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're just agreeing that we're going to swap places. We're both going to be much happier if we just take each other's worlds. And he goes back, and that's kind of how it ends. It's not a great story, and I think that's because it is pretty fluffy. It's really light, you know, and entertaining fluffy. I think, you know, having George Wendt, Norm from Cheers, playing the main character, I think goes a long way to making it likable and charming. So I will say that. I don't know if it feels like it's really saying a whole lot, to be honest, other than just a broad idea of the grass is always greener on the other side. But if that's the case, then it's a little bit strange that there's no lesson that's learned. It's just that both of them get what they want and they get to go to the other side. So it's a little bit ultra happy. And, you know, these are themes that Twilight Zone plays with. It tends to be like a nostalgic thing. You know, like any story where a character ends up in their past, you know, at the street they lived in, meeting the other kids that they hung around with when they were children. There's been several episodes of the classic show that did that kind of thing. It's kind of in that vein, even though it's not him getting into his past, even though there's a very past aesthetic to this other world. But it's kind of the idea of like he just ends up in this other place and it kind of lets him experience, in this case, a happier thing. Sometimes it's a sadder thing to make them appreciate what they've got in like a sort of It's a Wonderful Life kind of way. This wasn't that. This was, no, this other world's better. I'm staying here. This is great. So, yeah. I guess there was a line actually on the alternate world where his friend says to him, you're just like so ahead of your time. And I like the idea that on the regular world, the version of Norm that we see is behind his time. Like that's why they sort of like belong swapped, is that one is like looking forward ahead, and the other one is like, past the time that he would have been relevant, and that's why each world appeals to the other one. There's kind of a nice idea there. It's not really that, deeper, well sort of fleshed out or anything, but it's a nice idea. So yeah, it's okay. It's an okay story. I don't, it's kind of it's in that kind of middling territory, to be honest, but it's pleasant enough with likable actor at the helm. So, you can't go too wrong, but I don't think it's going to be a story that anyone remembers so heavily from this show. But that is my thoughts on this episode of Twilight Zone from the 1980s. I'm looking forward to see what we have next time. But yeah, the remake of After Hours probably is the best story, I should say, of this season so far. It's a very short season though, so they don't have a ton of chances to knock it out of the park. But I really hope they do. I hope they get a couple of bangers before we reach the end of this. It's got 11 or 12 episodes altogether, I think. Anyway, let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Thanks to everyone who already does. But that is me, so thank you for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.